Welcome in 2-for-1 Drafts. Austin Gayle here with my guy, Mike Renner. Mike, how are things going? I know you're on a bit of a PTO right now, paid vacation, still doing the podcast. I'm glad you're grinding it out.
I power through for the listeners, team player through and through. I'm gritty, gonna be here. I'm actually not even on vacation. I'm just taking PTO. I'm at home right now, literally at my desk.
Fair.
Not even, just hanging out. Same shit.
There you go. Today we're going to be going over the 2021 linebacker class in the NFL Draft, continuing our series where we do class overviews. I'd encourage everyone, if you haven't listened to previous podcasts, we've gone over quarterbacks, receivers, the entire offensive side of the ball, edge defenders, and defensive tackles. Also had some good interviews along the way. Damon Harrison, Calais Campbell, among others. Today, going over linebackers, we also interviewed a good friend of Mike's, current fullback for the Seattle Seahawks, but was drafted as a linebacker by the New York Jets, in Nick Bellore. I think his best analysis or takes were on special teams play and how important it is. I think since 2013, Bellore has played at least 200 special team snaps every single season, which I find, that's how he's staying in the league. This is his 10th year in the NFL?
Yeah. So we talked with him about just how important it is for, if you're not, top 3 rounds, if you're a day 3 guy or later, just like you can't afford to not play special teams. Like if you're drafted at a position like linebacker, position like safety, something like that, you have to make an impact at those positions. And I said this kind of in passing, but in the interview with Nick, but Ron Miles, a good friend of mine who's within the Lions scouting department, I believe he's the director of college scouting, I want to say. I should know that. I feel bad that I don't off the top of my head, but he's like, we literally, like, if a guy is not going to be a special teams player in 6th, 7th round, we can't draft him. Like, we will not draft a guy who cannot, just because that you can't, there's only so many roster spots, and a guy has to see the field if you're saving a roster spot for him. So it is kind of an interesting thing that we even at PFF overlook. Like, I don't really give a shit about special teams impact because it's such a small portion of like why you're actually drafting a guy. But you do have to fill out a roster, and plays like special teams still can make an impact on a football game.
And he was even saying, like, backup running backs, because him playing in Seattle, Travis Homer was a name that, like, he had to step up on special teams. And even though, obviously, Homer played primarily offense in college, you have to learn to tackle. You have to learn to play the fundamentals of special teams. And I thought it was, I really did think it was interesting, because I do think in the scouting process and all of this, it gets overlooked a ton, even though scouts, coaches, and obviously players prioritize it and value it significantly. He also had a good story about Marshawn Lynch and some high praise for Chris Carson. There wasn't no one loves Chris Carson as much as Nick Bellore does, which I found very interesting. I encourage you to stay on the pod after the linebacker overview to listen to that one. All right, let's jump in to the cream of the crop of this class, the guy that everyone's calling the consensus number 1 linebacker. I think there's potential in some of these other guys challenging this spot, but honestly, Micah Parsons might be the bona fide linebacker 1 in 2021, the Penn State kid.
No, there's no, I disagree with that take. No one will challenge Micah Parsons for linebacker 1.
Really?
In my opinion, there are 2 guys I would call generational prospects in this class. Micah Parsons, Penn Sewell. At their respective positions, I don't think we've seen a guy like Sewell in probably like 20 years, to at least 10 years. And I don't think we've seen a guy like Parsons since, Patrick Willis. Like, in terms of he's every single box, every single thing you want from a linebacker, like he has. He can do all those things. There's no like, oh, he's a little undersized, like, Devin White, Devin Bush. They were just a little undersized. No, Micah Parsons is 6'3", 245. Like, that is ideal linebacker size. There's no, he's not quite that, fast. He was 7th on Bruce Feldman's freaks list after his freshman year. He ran a 4.43 last spring. So there's a lot of things to like about his game. 2nd highest run defense grade we've ever given a linebacker as a true sophomore this past season. Can rush the passer. Like, if he was just evaluated as an edge prospect, he might be the number 1 edge prospect in this class in terms of the way he can rush the passer. 91.3 pass rushing grade as a freshman, 86.8 this past year. You can't block this guy when he's coming down the hill with the full head of steam. So I truly believe that no one's going to touch him. The only thing we really haven't seen is a lot of playmaking. We actually saw it more down the stretch this past year, 4 pass breakups. You would like to see a few more picks and PBUs from a guy you'd call a generational prospect. But again, only a sophomore. Doesn't have a single pick in his career, but he has another year to make up for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I was going to highlight with Parsons is that when you watch his tape, even 2019 and 2018, the playmaking ability or like the splash plays and coverage you didn't necessarily see. And that's reflected in his grade, a sub 70.0 coverage grade in 2019 and in 2018. But what is reflected in his grade is the man's instincts and the man's athletic ability. You don't see a guy reacting to plays in front of him better than Micah Parsons. And for that reason, I think you can count on him, those splash plays coming in coverage, because the hardest part is play recognition, identifying the play in time, and having the athleticism to make those plays in coverage. He's not a liability from an athletic perspective, and I think those instincts, with a bigger sample size, with more experience, will lead to splash plays in coverage. Well, talking about instinct specifically, I kind of want to expand this a bit, at the linebacker position, traits that you're looking for. Obviously, athleticism is super important, and it's become even more important as the NFL becomes this pass-happy league. But everyone and their mother brings up instincts, play recognition at off-ball linebacker and block shedding. I think those are two things that everyone kind of speaks to at the linebacker position that people want to see. And I think, obviously, Micah Parsons, I think you immediately see the ability, those instincts, and that block shedding.
The instincts is one thing that I think we've 100% overrated, though, at the college level early on in the days of PFF.
Absolutely. Because, go ahead.
It's something that's it's easy to recognize, but it's also not necessarily translatable scheme to scheme. Like instincts and how quickly you can play is a big factor of, one, how comfortable you are in your scheme, and two, like what you're asked to do. And we actually even touched on that with Nick about, how big the transition was, how long did it take him before he felt comfortable in the scheme. Like, that's such a big thing. He said some guys, it takes them a while. Some guys just don't have it right away. And I brought up Devin White with that, because he looked like a completely different player as last year at LSU in terms of his play speed and how quickly he recognized stuff, to this past season with the Tampa Bay Bucks. Like, a lot of it is just the amount that's put on your plate within the given scheme, and that you're able to, then you're already able to digest. And so you see guys play, if they go to a simplistic scheme that's not asking them to do a lot, and from a coverage perspective, they look like completely different players at the NFL level. Deion Jones is the guy that comes to mind as the shining example of a guy we've just whiffed on, because he was just all over the place at LSU in terms of, like, when he was asked to execute and read multiple different things at the same time, he just was slow. And being able to do that then gets to Atlanta, where it's just cover 3, same role, snap after snap, and all of a sudden, like, different player altogether. Not just from purely like a production standpoint, but legitimately was a different player than what you saw at LSU. He just was much, much better of a player. So there's a lot that goes into the linebacker position that needs to be taken into account for. And I think that's why it's been just a difficult position to scout. And all the data we have says, like, don't draft linebackers in the first round. It's just tough to identify the talented ones.
Yeah, I mean, that scheme dependence definitely, speaks to that. I definitely think with Micah Parsons, maybe reeling back my take that someone else can overtake him as linebacker 1. My take on this is that there are linebackers, though, that maybe aren't being highly coveted right now that I think can move up the board with a good 2021 season. I kind of want to start with Dylan Moses, the Alabama linebacker that missed most of last year due to injury. This guy, we've talked about him a little bit. Former 5-star recruit, ran, I think, a 4.4 at an LSU camp at like 13 years old, and was offered by Nick Saban a full scholarship right then and there. This guy is literally built different, was doing 300, 500 push-ups a day to get through as an 8th grader. His dad has literally been building him in a lab. Talk about a guy that I think can really rise up boards with a full, healthy season at Alabama.
Yeah, honestly, I think just with his level of athleticism at his size, 6'3", 235, and he's probably going to run 4, maybe sub 4.5. Like, he might be in the 4.4s, jump like 40 inches. He's just that level of athlete. He's probably going to go in the first round. Like, guys like that don't last that long. And he hasn't been bad by any means at at Alabama, but he hasn't been like a playmaker, has not been a guy who works downhill consistently and has like all the things you necessarily want. But just with that level of athleticism and how good he is as a tackler, like in space, wraps up extremely well, plays on balance. Those things are the difficult things to coach. The rest of the things you can like get a guy up to speed on to some degree. You can't coach explosiveness and you can't coach balance the way he has it. So I think even if he doesn't really put it all together this year at Alabama and have a dominant, year grading out exceptionally well, like Micah Parsons is probably going to or did this past season, I think you're still looking at Moses as a first rounder just because of those physical tools he has.
And I just don't know how easy it is to put it all together, to develop those instincts, to develop that play recognition to a point where you're taking advantage of that freakish athleticism snap after snap. Like, it's way easier said than done. And I know athleticism is relatively uncoachable, but still, gaining that play recognition and instincts to the point where like you're seeing it every snap is again, you need experience for that. You kind of have to have a natural feel for the position. And Dylan Moses, to be frank, has not been healthy enough to get that. And also has played a lot of different roles for Alabama. You've seen him rush the passer off the edge a handful of times. Obviously, he's played some off-ball linebacker in his time as well. I'm interested to see him kind of find himself a role in Alabama's defense, play it more consistently, obviously healthy, and see what he can develop into. I really do like the player, though, because, you watch this guy and you just see he is different. You talk about receivers that move differently. Dylan Moses moves differently, and that is something I want to buy into. All right, let's jump to Nick Bolton, the Missouri off-ball linebacker. He's earned a very, very high PFF coverage grade this past year, due in large part to some splash plays that, were relatively gifted to him, but still, those splash plays in coverage, impressive for, a linebacker at Missouri. What is your overall opinion of Nick Bolton?
Yeah, it wasn't just like the picks of him undercutting slants that were impressive and he had a 90.4 coverage grade this past season. He had a pass breakup in man coverage out wide against South Carolina where he just like stopped, throttled down on a hitch route from a running back, gets back to the ball and breaks it up. Like, he had 8 PBUs this past season and 2 picks. Like, he was a consistently around the football. That to me is the guys that are able to do that. I think that continues. You rarely see a guy have seasons like that and then go back to 0 pass breakups, 0 interceptions. Like, that just doesn't happen. There's something to that, in my opinion, that I think Bolton has. And this guy's 6 foot tall, 232 pounds, an absolute just rock. To steal my dad's favorite term about guys built like this, he's a brick shithouse is what how my dad describes it. I don't even know what that means, but he says it, and it sounds pretty cool. So I'll steal that one for him. Brick shithouse of a defender, of a linebacker. Reminds me kind of Devin Bush, where it's just, I don't think you saw Devin Bush go backwards on a tackle, just because he's built so low to the earth, so just strong throughout his frame that he's going to win that leverage battle, and he is going to stick you in your track. So that's the type of player he is, plays consistently downhill, and I think he just has some of that. Now, he's not the athlete that Moses is, not the athlete Parsons is, but he's a very good athlete in his own right. Probably a guy who's going to run 4.6 range. Like, he's still fairly fast and athletic. To me, he's a first-round type of talent, only going to be a junior this upcoming season. So the fact that he already had a 91.1 overall grade as sophomore, pretty darn impressive.
And very good against the run, too. Like, it wasn't just his 90.4 coverage grade that really elevated his grade. He also earned an 89.8 run defense grade, played over 700 snaps this past year. I agree with the brick house comment. And watching Parsons, then Moses, and then getting to Bolton, you see he's not that same level athlete, but he has enough. And you see that also in the production he has in coverage. And I think Dane Brugler, when we had him on one of the draft guys at The Athletic, he mentioned passes defensed, and plays and coverage picks and those things is something that sticks with defenders, cornerbacks, safeties, and even linebackers, because always being around the football is indicative of also obviously your athleticism to stick with these faster guys, and also your play recognition to be in coverage and be in the right spot at the right time. All right, after Bolton, would you say there's a little bit of a drop off to these next group here, or would you even include this next guy? Okay.
Next guy's a wild card, though. This next guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Literally the definition. I kind of like this guy, though. I really do. And I think he's another one like Dylan Moses, and we'll talk about him now, Chaz Surratt, the UNC quarterback turned off-ball linebacker. Obviously, his brother plays receiver at Wake Forest. But Chaz Surratt, I think with a very good 2020 season, will be easily talked about as one of the better off-ball linebackers in this class. Talk about athleticism, explosiveness, but raw as it gets. Literally played quarterback, I believe, in 2018.
Yes.
played linebacker for the first year in 2019. And you see, I haven't played this position before on his tape. Like, you see that. But what you also see is ridiculous explosiveness, ridiculous athleticism. He makes plays others can't. And that's exactly what you need in the NFL at off-ball linebacker, point blank. You need athletes that can move, that aren't liabilities in coverage. And if he can, sharpen some things, remove some of that raw from his film, and I think he can, because you saw him get better throughout that season. I do think Chaz Surratt is going to be up there with these names like Bolton and Moses.
I want to be one of the Surratt brothers. Like, I want to be in this family just with the way they play football. Like, these guys, they are quintessential gamers in every sense of the word. Like, they are out for blood, snap after snap after snap. Now, Chaz, the linebacker, is a little bit out of control. I'll just say, like, he doesn't have the finer points down of the linebacker position whatsoever. But you can't coach his will to get like the wherewithal, the want that he has every single play, and that out of controlness really showed up as a tackler. He missed 27 tackles on 130 attempts this past season. Pretty rough. That's a pretty rough rate. That is unacceptable for a linebacker, but you got to think this guy was playing quarterback last year. He was getting tackled only a year prior. So I'll forgive him for that. But you see these reps as a blitzer. One against Clemson, he literally just treated Travis Etienne as a speed bump, just put him flat on his back on the ground on a blitz. He had a pass breakup against South Carolina that was probably, I'm going to bring up another pass breakup that I saw. That was probably one of the two most impressive pass breakups from a linebacker I saw all last year. Never even looked back at the quarterback. Anytime you have one of those where a guy never looks at the quarterback the whole time, he's dropping, eyes on the wide receiver, breaks on the ball, dives at that catch point without ever seeing the quarterback have to throw it. Guys who trust themselves to that degree, I always fall in love with. I think that is a thing that you need to have at the NFL level, that trust in what you're reading that is actually going to be there. Any hesitancy I don't want on my football field. So he has all those things, but again, the tackling needs to be cleaned up and just needs kind of a little rough around the edges, smooth that stuff out. And I think he could be, I think right now he's easily a day 2 talent. He could push his way towards the first.
Eight missed tackles in his first 3 games at linebacker. That surprises no one, though. That's one of the harder things to kind of develop playing a position as new as that, going from quarterback to linebacker. I'm glad you spoke to the recklessness, the want to, because I feel like that's again what pops off on tape and why you kind of come away excited about his potential and not necessarily worried about him sharpening things and removing some of that raw from his tape. All right, let's jump forward here and talk about Jack Sanborn. I've seen some guys really like Jack Sanborn, but when you compare him to some of these other guys with these tools that I want to jump all over, you don't see it, in my opinion, with Sanborn.
Yeah, so he's still young, though. He was only a sophomore last year, so he's going to be a true junior. The first thing that I noticed that, I can't get out of my head now watching his tape is he's maybe the most duck-footed football player I've ever seen in my life. Like, his feet, he's constantly T-stepping. Like, he's constantly, his feet are just sideways anytime he's running. It's impossible not to watch anytime I watch him now because it's just stuck in my head. But that aside, he's actually fairly athletic. He's kind of, I'd say by NFL linebacker standards, probably an average athlete. So he's good enough athlete, 6'2", 220. That's kind of been Wisconsin linebackers. There's been a handful that have graded out well in recent years. The problem has been none of them have been worth a darn athletically, any of those guys. This Sanborn actually has that level of athleticism, has really good balance. He just has no power to his game at this point. No real explosiveness to his game. He's 6'2", 228, and slipped off a ton of tackles. 24 misses on 100 attempts. That's, again, unacceptable. But again, he's young. He just needs to get stronger. He gets stronger, this guy's probably a day 2 sort of prospect. Gotta
add some beef to his game. All right, let's jump to one of my other favorites in this linebacker class. I'm gonna butcher this name, but Paula Ie Gaoteote. I don't know if that's right.
Naoteoteo.
Wow. That's impressive, but the
that's close.
He plays.
I honestly, I'm rooting against this guy as a prospect just so I don't have to learn that name, and 2 just because he goes to USC, which
Yeah, the USC off-ball linebacker, former 4-star, 5-star recruit.
I don't root against anybody, by the way. Sorry. Go ahead.
What I really liked about him was that I think battled some injuries, hasn't played a ton or as much as you'd probably want him to play early in his USC career. But when he's on the football field, moving forward, I thought was really impressive. Blitzing, playing the run, staying near the line of scrimmage. I thought you saw that burst, that explosiveness to be a playmaker at off-ball linebacker. Again, it's when you see it. When you see it, even in bursts, you get excited. And I think you see that with him.
So another young guy, going to only be a junior this upcoming season. He's sneaky big. Like, watching his tape, I didn't realize he's 6'2", 250 is what they list him at USC. So that's real deal size, and he's athletic. But right now he's kind of just a big athlete that got thrown at linebacker and doesn't really – like, he has less playmaking instincts and less splash plays on his tape than a guy like Chaz Surratt, who just literally just switched to linebacker. He does not have that aspect to his game whatsoever. I wrote down in my notes here, where are the splash plays? Where's like a nice quick read, gets to the ball, makes a play? Like, there's not a lot of that just on his tape. And I think he's just the awareness aspect. If we still had NCAA football, his awareness rating would be pretty darn low. Just like in terms of recognizing where a play is going, taking on blocks, being able to see blocks. There was a play against BYU where he just got cracked to the turf just because he didn't see a wide receiver coming for him. So I do think that aspect of his game is the worrisome part. But again, can't teach big athleticism. That's something everyone's going to covet at every level, hoping that they can harness it.
I think his splash plays were when he was making predetermined reads or predetermined blitzes. Yeah, blitzes were big. Like, if in short yardage situations, him just firing off the ball, you saw it. But then I agree that the awareness is what kept him from making those plays consistently, because you can't just blitz him every play. Like, there's a lot of read and react to playing off-ball linebacker at the NFL and collegiate level. So when you put him in those situations where he has to think and he can't be as reactive or moving forward at the line of scrimmage, I do agree that you saw some concerns. Just this past year, 507 snaps played, a 64.3 overall grade, and a 53.2 grade in coverage. Concerns there. All right, jumping forward here, KJ Britt. I haven't watched any of KJ Britt. I didn't know he was coming on this list. Talk to me about Britt here. So
he graded out really well this past season as a junior for Auburn. Auburn linebacker, 89.8 run defense grade, 70.1 coverage grade, a old school thumper downhill. When he goes and takes on a block, the offensive lineman goes backwards sort of linebacker. Athletically, easily the most limited guy we've brought up yet on this list. Like, he is bottom of the barrel athletically. Unfortunately, he got stuck covering the slot against Florida. Option route against Freddie Swain. Literally went 64 yards for a touchdown. Just a simple in route. He was so far away from it that Swain just turned upfield and had nothing but green grass. It's tough to watch. He just does not have the level of athleticism you want from an NFL linebacker. So yes, I put him on this list because of the grade, to highlight that we know this Auburn guy is a high grade, but he is not a guy who's going to be drafted anywhere in the first, second, third, fourth round anytime soon, I don't think.
All righty. Last guy here, and this is a name that I will probably butcher as well, but it's Jeremiah Owusu Koromoa. Actually, I thought that was pretty decent.
Yeah, you got it. That was it. Yeah.
Jeremiah Owusu Koromoa. I thought, again, we're getting kind of to the outside of the guys that really have high profile potential. I did not love or come away super impressed with him, but again, another guy that could improve in 2020.
No, so I think he could. I threw him on this list because he has the traits to push higher. He is. If we were to award I was going to give him the fun to watch label. Micah Parsons is just so good. He's probably the most fun to watch. After Micah Parsons, I think JOK is what I call him at Notre Dame. I don't know if anyone else calls him that, but that's just way easier than saying.
That's not bad.
JOK. So JOK is the most fun to watch because he goes from 0 to 100 in the blink of an eye in every single play. It doesn't matter if he made the wrong read or if he's not where he's supposed to be. He's going 100 miles an hour, and it's incredible to watch. And he is very athletic for a linebacker, undersized, 6'1", 216, plays the overhang role in Notre Dame's defense. But you'll just see these unreal plays where he's knifing into the backfield on like a wide pitch and getting to the running back as he's catching the ball. He just has these plays on his tape where it's like, whoa, where'd that come from? And then he'll be in the backfield also on a play action pass where he was not supposed to be in the backfield. And he's supposed to be in coverage. And you're like, well, what the hell is he doing? What is he looking at? So he is a guy who just is just out of control, like just too out of control at this point. Reminds me of West Virginia's David Long. If anyone listening remembers him, he was like a 4th rounder a couple years ago, where he just.
I think he still plays in the NFL.
Yeah, I think it's with the Titans. I think it's with the Titans. I believe. Yep. I'm not 100%, but yeah, he was just couldn't do anything. Not at full speed, and so he'll overrun plays, has some terrible mishaps on his tape. But then he'll have plays like there was this was the other pass breakup I referenced earlier when I was talking about Chaz Surratt. JOK had this pass breakup against Virginia Tech where they motion a guy across the line of scrimmage, and he's on the guy who's motioning across the line of scrimmage, and so he's running across the line of scrimmage. The ball is snapped. He ends up. A tight end goes vertical on that side. He just picks up the tight end like seamlessly. No one else had the tight end. He picks him up, and like the quarterback thought he had an easy touchdown. It was in the red zone, like the 15-yard line, and JOK is just in the guy's hip pocket. You just don't see a guy that's supposed to just mess you up with the motion like that. You don't see a guy seamlessly get to that ball the way he did. So he'll have plays like that and alternate them with just some disasters, but. Those are the ones that make you think, hey, if like you can just harness this, because he's a really good athlete and can make an impact on special teams as well. Has at Notre Dame. So we'll see how he does this year. I have, fingers crossed, high hopes for my boy.
Thinking about this class overall after running through these first few, Moses, Surratt, Na Ote, and JOK. And you're talking about guys that have these tools, these traits, these like single plays where you're like, man, he has it. Mm-hmm. But then you come out of it like he has to get so much better. He has to clean so much up before like you can play linebacker consistently and not be a liability. Because it is a position that as the NFL continues to play more 11 personnel, as tight ends get more receiver heavy, like it is a position where you can be exposed. Like you can be highlighted as a liability and absolutely destroyed for big gains, time after time. So that's why these guys that do have this athleticism and stuff, they need to kind of shore things up so they're not put in a position to lose. That's going to do it for the linebackers we're going over right now. Obviously, some more to add to this list as we press forward towards the 2020 season, hopefully being that there is a 2020 season. But until then, let's go ahead and jump to the interview with Nick Bellore.
Joining the 2-for-1 Drafts podcast is current Seattle Seahawks fullback, but also former linebacker. Played linebacker for the Fire Up Chips, Central Michigan, and also the New York Jets, and is a close friend of Mike, Nick Bellore. Thanks for coming on the pod.
Guys, thanks for having me. Obviously, it's fucking dire times for you guys to have me as the voice of fullback in the NFL come on, but I appreciate it.
Of course, we tried for Luke Kuechly. We tried for some other guys, but this is where we ended up. It's not that bad, though. Not dire straits. I wouldn't put it that way. But
you're going for a linebacker-fullback conversion. I think I'm maybe your only choice. So
perfect. I think it's honestly perfect. This is great. All right. Well, let's go ahead and kick off with this, man. I want to talk about obviously that not necessarily talk about the transition yet, but playing linebacker at Central Michigan, playing linebacker for the New York Jets. What do you think, some of the bigger things were, like bigger learning curves were at the linebacker position?
I think the biggest thing is, moving in initially, going right into Rex Ryan's defense. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things you got to kind of, comprehend early on to play, because especially in a scheme like that, kind of like what, Mike Pettin is running, there's a lot of, interchangeability with guys where you have guys that have to do different roles at different positions, blitzing. Everyone's got to be able to have a certain skill set. So I think that is, and, I think going from high school to college to pros is all kind of the same tier up, and it's the same learning curve. There's a lot less room to make mistakes. Guys are a lot bigger, a lot faster, and that kind of just keeps going as you progress through the levels.
So this is a rookies and drafts focused podcast. So we talked a lot about rookies, and last year, Devin White for the Bucs, you could see him when he was on the field, just the play speed with which he processed things and reacted was different from when he looked like at LSU. How long do you think it took you going from college to the NFL to feel like you were I guess, like back in college, back to where you felt like you were seeing things and reacting at the level you were back then?
Yeah, I think it depends on the guy for sure. But, I think everyone can point back to like a moment or so where they really kind of learned, this is different. I have to do things a little bit faster. I have to speed up my process of, seeing things. And I think guys, especially if they're able to play with older guys, are able to kind of like learn. You think you know how to study the game and learn to see things, but unless you're really taught to study stuff the right way, to know what to look at, even down to that, I don't think you see guys progress that fast unless they have someone that's kind of, like Luke Kuechly, like I'm sure playing with a guy like that, he's able to teach guys, discipline with their eyes, and that just makes guys appear faster than they may actually be just because they see stuff faster.
I want to talk about, and we talked a little bit about this with Snacks Harrison, talking about how even defensive linemen are getting smaller. And at the linebacker position, it's true as well. I mean, we talked to Drew Tranquill, Notre Dame, was saying there were coaches that told him in the pre-draft process that they're fine with him playing like 220, 215. Like they don't care how big you are anymore necessarily. What's your opinion of that? And like how the new like 3-down linebacker is closer to 240, 235 pounds than they are 250, 260.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something, obviously, I'm getting to be somewhat of a dinosaur now going into my 10th year. And when I came in, it was kind of like the thing to be 250, 260. And, even at fullback now, like this year, I'm going to try to play 230, 235, which
wow.
I've been creeping up to, 250 for the last couple of years. Obviously, I live in Chicago in the off season, so there's a lot to eat and drink. So that never helps my weight. But I think it's obviously becoming all about speed now, and really like the thumping that you used to see. All the guys that I started playing with were all. I mean, 250 was the weight you were at, and now I think you'd be hard pressed to find many linebackers that are playing at over 240. Which is hard to believe. A lot of guys, when you see them on the field, they appear a lot bigger than, they actually are. A lot of guys are, 230, 235, because there's really no need, especially with how, passing dominant things have become, to have that extra size. And, I think it trickles down to other position groups, but really you can see it a linebacker versus what it used to be, 5-10 years ago.
I want to get back to kind of your transition to the NFL. What was the difference in kind of, I guess, playbook size going from college to the pro? How much more do you have to know going into any given week compared to back when you were, back at Central Michigan?
Well, yeah, I think it was a weird circumstance for me, and it will be a weird circumstance for rookies coming in this year because I came in the year of the lockout. So there was no, we didn't have a playbook. We had no idea. The one, saving thing for the rookies this year is we had Zoom meetings and they were able to kind of dig into it. But, it depends team to team. And, some defenses are way more complicated than others. But I would say it's just a lot more focused on it's a lot more mental in the NFL than it is physical in terms of, throughout the week. Meetings and all that stuff is a lot more taxing, and there's a lot more stuff you have to learn. And on top of that, most linebackers that aren't, day one starters, they're going to be playing special teams, and a lot of them have never done it in college. So that's a whole nother element of stuff that they have to learn. And that's not only playbook stuff, but just physical skills that they need to acquire that they may not have, been asked to do in college.
Yeah, jumping off that special teams thing, how important was that when you got to the league? Because I've talked with some guys around the NFL who are, in scouting departments, player personnel, and they're like, if we draft a guy in the 6th or 7th round that can't play special teams, like that's a waste of a draft pick because you have to, if you're a later round guy, you have to be able to see the field in some capacity. So how much was that stressed when you entered the league?
Yeah, I mean, it was huge with the Jets, and I knew that's why I was there. I had never done it before in the past, but really it's just a collection of all the basic fundamentals of football. But I try to stress that on guys that are coming in because, especially let's just say like in Seattle, it's like, we draft guys. We have Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright. It's like you're not starting over them. Yeah. So you're either playing special teams or you're not playing. And there's only so much room on a team. Obviously, that's kind of how I found my way and have continued to stick around as playing special teams. And some guys I think are too think they're too good for it, or too proud to play that. Like it's almost like but I think the guys that get it either make a living out of it just doing that, or continue to progress and end up being starters that maybe they were always destined to be, but just due to depth or whatever on the particular team, it didn't warrant it right out of the gate. So I think it's huge. And, you only have so many spots, and then even more so, less spots active on game day. And if you're not contributing at a skill position on special teams, then you really can't play.
I mean, looking at special teams, you've played over 200 special team snaps every year since 2013. So you've obviously made a home there. How often is it repped in practice? Because I feel like people talk about it as the third phase, and it's obviously not repped as much as offense and defense. But how many reps are you getting in season with special teams?
It's tough because it gets a little gnarly trying to do some of that stuff in practice. But,
yeah,
it depends team to team. I think all the teams that I've played on, it's been a huge emphasis. Which I can't, speak to every team, obviously, but it's always a very condensed, intense period. So it's usually like 15 to 20 minutes of practice. And it's one of those things that, it's a lot of drill work because it's hard to cover kicks in practice. And really that's where, preseason games and that kind of stuff, as much as I hate to say it, because I don't know anyone that really likes playing in the preseason that much, but it really is good for guys to get a feel for what it's like, because it can get pretty hectic out there on a kickoff, and, you see your buddies get smoked in front of you.
Oh man, dude,
so it's, you always got to kind of warn guys that there's, guys out there that are capable of knocking you out quite easily. So usually you see it with the young guys, they run with their head down, and then, usually the inevitable happens. But, it's always fun for me in the preseason because you can usually spot them out. And, I just hope that I get to block guys like that. But
do a couple bad plays come to mind? I know on special teams where you get your bell rung. I mean, in practice, I remember in high school, this is no comparison, but for varsity as a sophomore, just getting absolutely destroyed on punt, trying to cover punts or cover kicks. Did any of those come to mind, even early in your career in the NFL?
It was when I went to New York, it was all right, I was going to be kind of one of the guys on special teams. And it was my first game. We played the Texans, and I ran down on kickoff. And this is back when they had the wedge. So it was, pretty wild out there. And I ran down thinking it was 2 linemen too, got absolutely smoked. And I walked off the field, and I actually, I think I told one of my buddies, I'm like, yeah, I'm never going to be able to play. This is going to be it. And I was like, I can't.
That's insane.
So that happens to everybody. I think, I was lucky because I remained conscious the whole time. But some guys learn really the hard way, and it's just different because you have a different play speed. And on a play like kickoff return, it's you have guys flying. And that was before they had the restraining lines. So guys were just taking off, and it was just absolute mayhem out there, which I'm kind of glad that kind of got whittled down a bit. But, yeah, I could think of something on every level where you do something. I remember trying to tackle Brandon Jacobs when he was really rolling with the Giants in the preseason, my rookie year. And I'm like, this guy's not, he weighed, and I'm like, this is not something that I think I'll be able to do long term. But you kind of, adjust and learn how to, grab a guy's ankles instead of put your head on their thigh, and kind of adjust accordingly.
So I know you guys have been having Zoom meetings and having some guest speakers over the course of the offseason. Any good ones over the course here?
Yeah, we had some good ones, and it's funny in Seattle because we can record what happens, and because it's always entertaining with Pete. We had Will Ferrell come on. He took his shirt off. That was hilarious. Had Steve Kerr come on and talk about when MJ hit him in the face or whatever. This was during
Last Dance.
And then we always do like group presentations, and it's kind of a competition to see who wins. And Russ got Michael Jordan to come on, which is pretty funny. He was like in the middle of fishing. So he was like, all right, let's wrap it up here. I got to go fish. But it was fun to have him on. And it just kind of breaks it up because, as much as coaches like to think that we all love that stuff, it gets a little fucking old after a while. But we did a great job of like keeping it light, because obviously it's kind of uncharted territory for teams that do these Zoom meetings. And, you had the normal shit, like guys pretending like their Wi-Fi went out when they were asked questions and stuff like that. But it was good. I mean, a lot of good guests and like funny little segments that we did in meetings.
Do you guys think with all this coronavirus stuff, do you feel like you'll be prepared going into the season? Like if they have a normal, say, obviously they've already canceled the Hall of Fame game, but say you have a normal preseason, do you feel like you as a team will be prepared compared to years prior?
I think we did pretty much everything we could. I think it'll be a lot better than, I mean, I guess I didn't know any different, but when I came in, it was lockout. It seemed like pretty normal, even though looking back, like I'm sure the veterans didn't do anything leading up to that. They were just at home the whole time. But I think this has been a little bit different just because we were able to do meetings. So it was some semblance of normal, off-season programs. And, I think as long as guys were able to kind of get to a place to work out at least a little bit, I think we'll be in decent shape. I think that's a misconception too. Like this is not me, I will say, but guys are such good athletes. Like they can pretty much just like jump into it and be okay. Like we'll have to kind of ease into it a little bit just with, I'm sure everyone will be petrified of injuries, but I think most guys take care of their bodies enough or don't need to, that everyone will be fine.
I know it's been mostly Zoom meetings, and you're probably not working with the linebackers a ton, but I know the Seattle Seahawks, recently drafted a young stud at linebacker in Jordan Brooks. Have had any conversations with him or talked to him at all?
No, I don't really like conversating with rookies, at all. So that's one thing I try to carry on and bestow to the younger guys is like, that's more seen, not heard out of those guys. But no, he seems like a nice guy. I haven't really had much interaction with him, other than I think I told him to sing his Texas Tech fight song during a special teams meeting, but that's about the extent of it. But it seems like we have a good rookie class. I just, it's tough because a lot of times they're in separate meetings than we are. And, as an old guy, I'm kind of in the get off my lawn stage of my career. So those young guys annoy me for no apparent reason. So I try to keep my distance a little bit.
Were you surprised they went linebacker with obviously like not much of a need at the position at the moment?
I honestly like try not to pay attention to it at all because I just get infuriated if, you get someone drafted at your position. So I'm like, I'm pretty sure they're not going to draft a fullback in the first round. So I really hope they can pick the
fair enough
and kind of move on. But that's always funny is like people ask her like, oh, are you excited to watch the draft? And I was, fuck no, I'm not excited to watch the draft. It's like people lining up for your job or whatever. But no, it'll be interesting. I've heard good things, and it seems like a real athletic dude that should be able to play early.
I want to get your opinion of the Seahawks backfield because I feel like a lot of people, love Chris Carson. Obviously, started there in Seattle, but then Rashad Penny. I'm a San Diego State guy, big Rashad Penny fan, but even Travis Homer, contributed well. I mean, this past year, talk to me about each of those guys and the strengths they bring.
Yeah, I think, starting with Chris Carson, I think he's like criminally underrated. And he's an absolute specimen running the ball. And I'm glad that I don't play linebacker anymore and play against him because, the stuff that he does to guys is, disrespectful. But just a great dude, too, and a great guy to have in the room. It was unfortunate he got dinged up at the end of the year, but it looks like, he's feeling good and ready to, have another huge year. And then Penny's obviously, a super talented young guy that, I think has all the pieces to be a great back and a good compliment to Chris. And then, I think Homer did a great job filling in because it was obviously got weird at the end of the year. We just had a lot of injuries, one after another. And I think, just like I was alluding to earlier, Homer's a guy that really embraced the special teams thing. And that's, he did a great job at that, had a great fake punt conversion for a first down, and just, really started to learn it. And it's not easy for offensive guys because those guys most of them have never had to tackle anybody or do stuff like that before. So, a guy that can learn it that fast, I think that is huge because, you can use him. He, picks up blitzes. He's able to do all that stuff and then also be able to contribute on fourth down.
So Marshawn Lynch came in towards the end of the year last year for you guys. And I know everyone has like a Marshawn Lynch story or something crazy that he's done in your presence. Do you have a good one that you can tell on the podcast that maybe it might be PG-13 instead of R or X-rated?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, there's so many. He was like, I guess he was only there for like 3 weeks, but it felt like he was like one of my favorite guys I've ever played with. I think it was early on, and he had just gotten there, and he sits down next to me in the meeting room, and he looks at me. He goes, "What's up, man? What's your name?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm Nick." He goes, "Do you play?" And I go, "Yeah, sort of, yep." And I go, "Do you?" He goes, "Yeah." So, and I was like, "All right, I got to do something here to get on his good side." So the next day, the rookies, we make them bring in donuts, and they usually just leave them in the running back room. And I usually go in there and closet, eat about 3 of them, and then go to running back meetings. Lights are usually off. I can usually get there. No one's the wiser that I was in there. So I go in, and we had signed Turbin and him. So we had a bunch of new backs, and after the backs had just gotten dinged up. So I cracked the door open, and the light's on, and I'm like, oh, shit. And, Chad Morton, our running back coach, was conducting a meeting with them, kind of bringing them up to speed on pass protections and stuff. And I was thinking, I made a split-second decision. I go, this is where I establish credibility with Marshawn. And I just decided to go for it. So I walk in, barge in. So Marshawn doesn't know that I'm not supposed to be in there. He assumes that I was late or whatever. Cut right past coach, go right to the donuts, grab a couple, look around. I go, "What's up, coach?" Look up Marshawn. I go, "I'm fucking out of here." Walk out. Like shocked. He goes, "Nick's crazy. What? He's crazy. He just walked out of coach's meeting." He didn't know that I wasn't even supposed to be in there.
That's amazing.
I rolled with it, and I was like, yeah, man, I just go to meetings when I feel like it. Walked out. I had to be in special teams anyways, but he didn't know that. So I still don't think he knows that. But he's like, it was crazy. He walked in, walked out, grabbed donuts. He didn't even care about Chad. I'm like, yeah, man, that's how I roll. So that established credibility early and often with him. And then it was funny too, because then we got to game day and I would hear music on the sideline. I'm like, that's weird. What is that? And I looked over at him and he had like a beanie on, like sideways. I'm like, where's that music coming from? And he would play music on his phone and put it in his beanie next to his ear. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you could get headphones if you really want. They don't have to be, ones that look like you're playing Battleship like Mike's, but like, I was like, you could do something here. But it was hilarious. It was like one thing after another. He is awesome, dude. Great teammate and like super fun to be around.
Absolutely. Marshawn, man, he's a story, just a walking story, it sounds like. Well, Nick, we really appreciate you coming on the podcast, the Linebacker Fullback Transition podcast. Really good stuff, man. We'll have to get you on soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.